So what were you doing between March and July of this year? If you said that you were hanging out with your old vocalist from that was last, in your band in 2004, hanging out with your old guitar player from like 30 years ago before he ended up in, some band that ended up being one of the biggest metal bands ever, hanging out with Chuck Billy and recording an album, you might be in Exodus. There's a good chance. In fact, you're probably like, yeah, that's me. I'm in Exodus. I'm their drummer. That's exactly what Exodus was doing whenever they were recording Blood In, Blood Out, their new album, which was just released. And a lot has kind of occurred within the past 4 years, ever since we got our first taste of the Atrocity Exhibition, Part B. Of course, we have now known of the reunion between them and Steve Souza, their old vocalist, who was last heard on Tempo of the Damned in 2004, which is a monumental album in the thrash revival. We need to understand also that this thrash revival we've been talking about is no longer a revival. It's been about a decade. In fact, it may be a little bit longer than that. This is no longer a thrash revival. This is the thrash revitalization. It's come full circle. We're here, and we've been here for quite some time. And we also know that on the track Salt the Wound, which we talked about a little bit earlier this year, that they hooked back up with Kirk Hammett for a song, and he did a guest solo, which was amazing. It was awesome. It's actually one of the best solos that he's done, and that includes Death Magnetic. It was really well tailored, fit the song, he shreds. That's what it's all about. So what can we say about Blood In, Blood Out? 62-minute long record, roughly. There's a deluxe edition that also includes a cover of Angel of Death, which is pretty cool. But the album itself, 11 tracks, 62 minutes, it's very, very different by comparison to the Atrocity Exhibition, which definitely had a varying sense of topic, a varying sense of lyrical content, and just overall really seemed to deliver, even though the personnel is a little bit different than we had last heard on Tempo of the Damned. With Steve being back in the band, it definitely resonates with a bit of an old-school approach, with a bit of an old-school feeling. And that's what Blood In, Blood Out really feels like it's all about. Exodus, with this album, it doesn't really feel like they're attempting to tread any new ground. It doesn't feel as though they're trying to break any new ground. And in fact, it seems as though they've kind of built their house in the middle of the street, and they are content to live in it, and just throw parties every so often. This album feels like a party. It feels like a good old-fashioned thrash metal throwdown. There's rage. There's just tons and tons of aggression. The riffs are big. The riffs are huge. But it's very thrash metal textbook. These are all riff patterns. These are all ideas that we've heard before in some way, shape, or form. These are all rhythmic passages that will feel and sound very contextually familiar to anybody who has listened to a thrash metal record in the past, say, 30 years. Does that make the album bad? No, actually. Actually, this makes this album very good and exactly what it really needed to be for Exodus to really reestablish themselves. Not that it ever felt as though they were kind of falling off the map, but this is something that really showed the world that Exodus still continues to maintain themselves as one of the most important thrash metal bands to not be included in the Big Four. One that's a very, very important facet of the Thrashiverse, and one that certainly has the ability to just throw down. Playing on Salt the Wound with Kirk Hammett definitely helped establish that. Having Chuck Billy come in to do some vocals for BTK makes me really, really stoked about the New Testament record, which will hopefully come out in 2015. Because he's just got a rage all his own. But just hearing Steve again, man, oh man. Steve has a great, great tone. He always has. Tempo of the Damned is just one of those just trademark albums from the thrash metal revival, the early portion of it, that really helped the idea take hold. Not to mention, along with the new crop that was starting to pop up, definitely helped to solidify the fact that this wasn't a one-trick pony. This wasn't just an idea that was going to happen for a couple of years and then just fade away. Instead, the thrash revival was going to be something that was here to stay and turn into a full-fledged revitalization of the genre and to its importance to heavy metal in general. I love the fact that this album doesn't pull any punches. This is one that does not feel the need to slow down for anybody. This is not one that feels the need to actually, cross things up a bit. It's not one that feels like it needs to have all of that much originality to it. It's in fact an album that really its strength is in its directness. It's in the fact that it doesn't pull any punches. It's in the fact that it's in your face at all times and does not relent whatsoever. It's actually what gives Blood In, Blood Out a very true name to itself. It's one that feels very much like a bare-knuckle brawl. Something that whenever you go and see this live, if you're not in the mosh pit or if you're not at least thrashing around like a maniac, whiplash, that you don't have any feelings. You don't have feelings, you don't have abilities. Music cannot touch you. You are a lost soul. You're a lost cause. Why do you breathe? Because this is what this music's all about. This music is all about just throwing your fist in the air. And the best way that I can describe it is with two words. And those two words are not stay down. It's instead the word stand up. This is an album that very much feels a lot like somebody punched you square in the face. And this is your reaction. This album is your reaction. Instead of just staying down on the ground, you stand up and you punch back. You fight back. You kick the ass that was trying to kick you. And that's the best way that I can really describe this disc. Through 62 minutes, it feels as though we have 11 anthems that encourage you to fight back. That encourage you to stand up. That encourage you to just punch and kick your way to, whether it be victory, vindication, whatever it may be. Exodus has made a thrash metal party that feels very much like a thrash metal throwdown. And that's actually what's going to give this album a ton of high praise from probably a lot of people. It doesn't tread new ground, but that's because not only did it not have to, but it didn't fucking want to. It's an album that was instead all about Exodus going into the studio and recording an Exodus album. It wasn't about Exodus going into the studio and recording an album with strange and out there ideas, because that's what musical evolution is. 30 years in, chances are good that you're going to have an identity, because if you've survived this long, especially in the turmoil-filled world that is the music business, chances are your identity is secure, and people are pretty alright with it. People are alright with Exodus's identity. They're certainly okay with their identity. Blood In, Blood Out is the perfect representation of their identity. They didn't need to be overly ambitious with the lyricism, though they did have some great ideas. This is an album that needed to be direct, was forcefully direct, and because of that, it's damn good. 83 out of 100. A solid disc from front to back. One that, as I said, did not need to bring all of that much new ground, but definitely feels like a band that was getting reacquainted with itself. Getting reacquainted to not only its roots, but also to what it was and what it is here in 2014. If you're looking for the massively creative, Exodus with Steve opus, The Tempo of the Dam Part 2, maybe look for the next album after this. But as of right now, just love and respect this one, because it's a hell of a beast and a hell of an animal. What did you think about this album? What did you think about this album, Nation? Blood In, Blood Out by Exodus. Let me know in the comments below. Let me know. Join the Facebook group. Let everybody know over there. Let's talk some Exodus. Exodus. Exodus.